Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to take a look at the new moon that is coming through in the early degrees of Leo, which will form an exact opposition to Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. As this new moon is forming, the sun is currently making trines to Saturn and Neptune, adds some fire to the intensity of the new moon opposite Pluto. I'm going to give you 5 things to watch for today. Tomorrow we will do horoscopes. So hopefully between this episode and tomorrow's episode, you get a sort of full treatment of what is a very powerful new moon this month. And we will obviously we'll take a look at a few of the other contextual factors happening in the sky to round off the week. I'm still determining exactly what my coverage for Friday is going to be, but there's enough happening peripherally around this new moon that we'll have plenty to talk about. So anyway, for now, before we get into it, as always, remember to like and subscribe. It is my hope that this channel is a place where you can draw deep from the well of the astrological tradition for the purpose of your spiritual life and growth. If that is the case, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps us grow tremendously, supporting all the work that we do. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. When you are over on the website, one promotion for the day, take a look at the events page, go to live talks, and you are going to see that we have all of the monthly webinars between now and December posted. I'm going to be talking between now and December on the 7th house, the 2nd house, and the 11th house. Those talks are going to give you really in-depth understanding of those houses in your birth chart, as well as the ancient underlying explanation for why the topics that we assign to those houses were ever assigned in the first place. Then I'm going to be starting a new series on pairing the planets. So we're going to be looking at Mercury's many faces and Venus's many faces in September and November. In those talks, I'm going to be showing you how Mercury combines with every other planet: Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the whole thing. This is going to be a really fun series when it comes to understanding planetary combinations, which for many people is a really good kind of intermediate topic. So I hope you'll enjoy all of these new series. When you register for any of them, of course, if you can't attend live, you'll get the recording later. So check those out. And be sure to check out our reading service if you've never checked it out before. We have an affordable reading service with different tiered pricing so that people of different budgets and backgrounds aren't priced out of getting a reading with some of the best students and staff that we have at Nightlight. So anyway, on that note, let's turn our attention now to the real-time clock. Here we are on Wednesday, July 23rd, and it is tomorrow, July 24th, Thursday, Central Time here, United States, that we'll see the new moon forming in the sign of Leo at the 2nd degree. That new moon, as many of you already know, is forming in an opposition with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. I mentioned this at the start of the week in our weekly overview, that this really is the topic of the week. Major new moon cycle. The thing to remember about everything we are about to say with the rest of today's content is that it is applicable not only for this week, but as a theme that will spread out. It's like the new moon is kind of like throwing a rock in a pond. I used to do that with my grandfather's house when I was a kid all the time. He had a pond in his backyard, and I loved throwing big rocks in it and then watching the ripples go all the way out to the shore. A new moon has a ripple effect like that. It is an event that has an acute kind of window in which you may experience the new moon, just like the full moon. But the narrative, the symbolism of the seeding of a cycle is relevant, for the entirety of the cycle. So what we're about to say is applicable not just for the next couple of days, but really for the entirety of this lunation cycle. That means, by the way, that we are looking at a moon cycle that comes all the way back around by about August 21st into the 22nd. So you can think about this lasting that long. Some of these themes will be prevalent for weeks to come. All right. On that note, I'm going to give you 5 things to watch for. Whenever I do these, by the way, they're in no particular order. So I'm not like ranking them as the top thing to watch for. What I try to do is give you, like, if there were a textbook that laid out what every transit promises. The thing about astrological transits is that they are as multiple and multifaceted, and archetypes are multidimensional, multivalent. because of that, it is so unique and so personal. I am always surprised by the way that I see planetary pairings show up in my life. What to speak of clients, students, I'm always hearing new stories. The grabbed stories that you guys share. There's seriously never a dull moment with astrology, and it's in that way sort of unpredictable. Ironic. But it is predictable in the sense that there are things that you see over and over and over again with certain planetary pairings. So I always try to include the things that are most common that you will likely see as themes around transits like this one, in this case, a new moon opposite Pluto. But I also try to have enough of them and enough variety of them that we're sort of turning that archetypal jewel of the planetary pairing, and hopefully landing one of these, if not all of them, will really touch on something that you see or experience. So that's the goal behind this. And I say that because the past couple of months, we've had thousands and thousands of new subscribers. And so just in case you're new to this series of 5 things to watch for. All right, number 1, death or transition of solar figures. You've been watching my channel long enough, you know that anytime the sun hits Pluto or Saturn, we talk about people dying. I'm just kidding. Death is metaphorical in almost all Sun Pluto, Sun Saturn contexts. Have I seen the actual death of a grandfather, a father, a leader, when the sun when the sun goes through any kind of major aspect with Saturn and Pluto? Yes, of course I have. It's far more common to see something metaphorical. Death is a living force in an animate cosmos that plays a role in a never-ending circle and cycle of life. So in that sense, I also don't encourage people to think about death, especially with Pluto, from the standpoint of fear or dread. Death, change, transformation, impermanence, flux, these are constants that planets like Saturn and Pluto can represent, but there's usually a meaningful purpose behind everything in creation. What to speak of planets that sometimes bring up, striking moments of change. So I say that again, just so that no one's freaked out. But when we have the sun in the sign of Leo, its home sign, the sign of the lion that wears the crown, the sign of kings and queens, the sign of fame, the sign of leaders, the sign of anyone that has a central role, power, authority. That new moon forming in Leo, opposed by Pluto in Aquarius, feels like the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the killing of monarchy, the death of a solar figure, the assassination attempt on a CEO's life, or the actual killing of a CEO that happened earlier this year. Those are the kinds of big, dramatic, flashy versions of this, but usually they're far more common than that in our everyday lives. This can be where, you just realize that your dad is getting older, and you have a moment of recognizing he's not going to live forever, even though you might have 3 more decades with him. The sun opposite Pluto, the new moon in Leo opposite Pluto, can bring reminders that the sun sets, the sun dies. It goes into the underworld every single day. That's a reality that it's easy to try to push away from the sunny side of life, where it is not comfortable to think about endings. It's not easy to relinquish attachments, and it's never fun to think about impermanence. But when a new moon forms opposite Pluto, we're talking about a cycle in which the relinquishment of attachments, impermanence, death, deep changes like the sun setting are going to be a part of the cycle for many people, if not metaphorically, sometimes literally, but usually it is metaphorically. And we have to start thinking about what that looks like. On one level, it could be the death of some part of our ego, the death of some role or position of power or responsibility that we have, and the handing of that power or responsibility over to someone or something else. Regime changes are very sun opposite Pluto, politically speaking. The death of rulers or leaders or famous people who pass away under sun-Pluto dynamics, very common. So one of the things that we may see will be transitions of leadership, or leaders and solar figures who are in the spotlight. That is something we're going to bring up through another theme in another point in a little bit here. But first, watch for change, death, transitions around fathers, leaders, central figures, people with fame or power, great responsibility, great visibility. This would be common for a moon cycle like this. Number 2, personal versus collective pleasures. Of course, we're working with the Leo Aquarius axis. And one of the things that I like to think about, like in the ancient world, when astrologers were first popular, horoscopic astrology, the kind of astrology that we do, they were often the advisors or counselors to leaders, kings, queens, powerful people. They acted as advisors that helped the central figure, the central authority, to remain aware of larger collective forces like the gods, whose planets, whose powers resided in the planets. So in that way, the astrologer makes sure that the king knows that they are an ambassador on behalf of the gods. Their order is supposed to mirror cosmic order. Ideally, they are somehow an embodiment of the will of the divine, but they're also human. And so it takes ideally, like a good leader has a good astrologer, and the good astrologer is someone that keeps them aware of those influences, those forces, those patterns, and the role of those deities that they serve. I use that as an illustration for what the collective and personal tensions across the Leo Aquarius axis might look or feel like for us this week or in the month ahead. For all of us, part of our life is determined by our own will, by our own way, by what feels authentic within us. And there's something about us like a dharma. We cannot be ourselves unless we are X, Y, and Z. And to be these things is to be utterly unique, utterly myself. And in order to be those things, there are important moments in life where we resist collective social pressures to conform or to be someone else. I remember, growing up in the 90s, the grunge alternative rock movement, indie music, indie film, everything was in a way resistant to pop music or things that were popular. This is super Aquarian, not surprisingly. We had some big transits like Neptune entering Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius, the mid-late 90s, right? When you have a new moon in Leo, but it's opposite Pluto in Aquarius, there are times where you have to say, like, I don't care who you think I need to be or what social stories you think I need to pick a side with and identify myself with. I'm none of it. You don't own me. It's like that. Okay, so that's important. It's important that we resist the pressure that we experience socially. On the other hand, there can be something of like a recklessness and maybe even an egoism that's rooted in not being considerate, not considering that we're social animals that live in a social reality, in a social cosmos, where the realities of living beings, living in categories, cultures, ecosystems, races, religions, backgrounds, stories, if we're not aware of those things and we turn our nose up and say, I'm beyond them, I'm above them, I'm so unique, I have nothing to do with them, you can't, I won't conform to anything. That can also be problematic because it can lead us to a kind of isolation or almost like a God complex, like I'm above or beyond any kind of social conventions. If you ever met someone like that, I mean, there's maybe a part of us that recognizes there's some brilliance in being so insistently ourselves. It's like, it's kind of admirable. But on the other hand, it's kind of annoying. It's like, I remember, I'll just tell the story. I remember I had a friend when I was younger who wouldn't come over to my house because when I had friends over, they would eat dinner with me and my family. He was like, I don't sit down for family dinners. I was like, dude, you're being such a dick. I was like, come on. Like, we're going to hang out. Well, my family eats dinner. Just eat dinner. Who cares? It's not a big deal. No, I don't want to do traditional stuff. It's like, oh, you're so much cooler than everyone else, So like some ability to conform or adapt or or honor a greater social reality. That's really important. It's super important. I found myself recently, and you'll meet the new co-hosts on the channel soon. I found myself thinking about this a lot in terms of taking talented applicants. So many, we had so many applicants for the co-host spots where we're helping people grow their careers. And it would be, in my mind, the Pluto Leo Aquarius axis, right? Like, or the Sun Pluto across this axis. It would be, this is just me reflecting on this. It would be completely stupid for me to, in the name of diversity, overlook individual capacity and talent for the position at the same time, to completely ignore that co-hosts are going to be reflecting a very diverse audience would also be ignorant. It's like, how do you hold these pressures or tensions between collective forces that are real and individual forces that have to resist categorization? You're an individual, and you can't just be put into a group or a category. Well, all of us are figuring this out, right? Because it's a part of being alive. So I don't have the answers. Just like you, I'm just stumbling my way along, doing the best I can. But on that note, I think that you will find, I hope you will find that the co-hosts represent, hopefully, the same diversity of our audience while also being very talented individuals. And like, it is possible for us to hold the tension of opposites. It is possible for us to carry collective identity and personal identity that resists collective identification at the exact same time. So always where there is an opposition, there's a temptation to think it's black or white. I have to collapse into one side of a binary. Keep that in mind, because a new moon like this can bring up those kinds of tensions and pressures in very strong ways. All right, number 3, an eruption of will, force, or creativity. Pluto has tremendous eruptive power. What it touches, it compels, it fills with a kind of intensity and fire and depth and power and like potency. So a new moon opposite Pluto can be eruptive in terms of the willpower, the strength, the determination, the perseverance, the survival mode. You know, like, I'm getting into, like, I'm going to live through, I'm going to get through this, I'm going to persevere, I'm going to overcome. Or a tremendous release of force or creativity. You think about it almost just on an energetic level. We call it that. There's a way of describing planetary symbols that I call energetic. I do not believe that's the only way to describe planetary events, but in the energetic way of describing them, this is a moon cycle that has the potential to release a lot of energy, force, will, drive, power, passion, creativity, because it starts off opposing Pluto. That's the heck of a seed to imprint itself on the cycle. Number 4, explorations of power. Now, here's where I go back to solar figures. When we're thinking about solar figures, whether it's a president, a CEO, leader of a local community, or whether we're even localizing it even more, like your roles and duties that you have control or power over within your company. That's your little section of power. So Pluto dynamics, when a new moon starts in Leo, sign of the king or queen, that like sort of centralizes a figure or a role or an area of power that's individual, then it opposes it with Pluto. It can be about exploring the shadow of power, of influence, of, are you doing things with more than just yourself in mind with the way you use power? Are you doing the best job you can for some larger mission or purpose? Very Sun opposite Pluto. So the shadows of power, explorations of power, transitions of power, even almost like Machiavellian, the ends justify the means kind of thinking, dictatorial, executive decision-making that has not gone through the proper system of checks and balances. It's like, sometimes I think of my worst dad moments where I just sort of am like, I've run out of patience. And so rather than guiding my kids through a process of like learning that's patient, I'm just like, this is the way we're doing it. Do it this way. Or, just kind of lose your shit. and you strong arm something, and you can become like a bulldozer. So you have to be very careful of the right demonstration of power, of creativity, of will, of force. That is, because there's also like tremendous shadow in this combination that can come up around ego and power, and my way is the only way or the right way. Number 5, revelation and eruptive or purgative force. The sun is by its very nature a planet of illumination. It rejoices in the ninth house in traditional astrology, the place of higher wisdom and enlightenment, a dharma house that's related to understanding the laws of the universe. It's just why astrology resides in the ninth house as well, right? So when the sun contacts Pluto, Hades, that which is deep within, in the underworld, in the unseen, in the unconscious, the primal, but the what is deep and primal and not always visible. Hades is a shadowy place. When the two contact each other in an opposition to start a cycle, the cycle ahead may be about tremendous revelation. By that, we mean things that become seen, things that have been invisible, that erupt, transform our understanding. Suddenly, something goes from invisible to visible. A purgative force, if something's stuck that's toxic or sick, we can sort of vomit it out, metaphorically. Not surprisingly, when I was going through the first couple of years of ayahuasca experiences, those were major Pluto transits in my chart. Not surprising, all the all the barfing. So anyhow, these are 5 things to watch for given this very powerful new moon in the sign of Leo opposite Pluto. We're going to touch on the whole sign house of Leo and the opposition with Aquarius in your birth charts in horoscopes tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. I hope you're all having a good day. Make sure that if you have a story to share now or ever on the channel, use the hashtag grabbed and then tell us the transit and tell us your story. Be concise. We may use it in a future storytelling episode or forecast. Yeah, I'm looking forward to introducing you to all of these wonderful, wonderful astrologers who'll be joining me for monthly overviews and horoscopes coming up soon. So that'll be next week. All right, anyway, have a good one.